The Battle of Saratoga consisted of two battles, but was put together as one because they were only fought 18 days apart. This battle took place in 1777 and was a huge turning point in the American Revolution. It was also a major victory for George Washington and his Continental Army. Now, before the Battle of Saratoga took place, there's a few causes of why it may have happened, especially in those locations it took place.
Let's first talk about Benedict Arnold, who was a very important person in the Battle of Saratoga. He was best known for a traitor who spied for the British during the Revolution. He was an American patriot before, but he spied for the British later on. This is a short story of Arnold. His leg got very wounded at the Battle of Freeman's Farm because he did something. I'm not going to go into detail about that because this is a story of Saratoga. All you guys need to know that he was a big traitor to the Americans. He also became a traitor because of this event. He remained a patriot for the next few years, but he was very upset because he got little recognition in the war, so he had enough. Arnold headed out and looked for people who would give him recognition for stuff he did. He then became a spy for the British, and he was known as a big traitor to the Americans during the Revolution. Now we talk about the battle itself and the events that led up to this. The leader of the army was John Burgoyne. His plan was to get to Albany to join forces with General Howe, another leader for the British. He would also meet up with another group as well. But on their way to join forces, the British would first capture Ticonderoga, which they did capture, in fact. But when all of this was happening, George Washington, general for the American army, saw how bad it was going to be if both of the British armies were joined as one. So long story short, Washington saw it as a big problem, so he called for a battle, and it later resulted in the Battle of Saratoga. And of course, the British didn't want to battle now. Burgoyne needed more men and more supplies, but the Americans had other plans. They couldn't let Burgoyne and his army get to Albany. And that leads to the Battle of Bennington. While the British were trying to go south, the Americans were blocking their way by shooting at them through the forest. While the British tried to continue, the Americans didn't let up. Then, the Americans and the British fought. That's not exactly how it went, but it was pretty much fighting and strategy. Now, there's a lot of details, but all you really need to know is the Americans won the Battle at Bennington, and the Battle of Bennington was also a lead-up to the Battle of Saratoga. Now, the British continued toward Albany, even though they lost a lot of their men, and they needed to get more supplies, food, and more men, while the Americans were still trying to stop the British from getting to Albany. Fast forward to September 19th, where the one out of the two battles took place, the battle at Freeman's Farm. The two armies met right there. It was Washington's army and Burgoyne's army, marching toward each other on the land. The battle started, and it was going well for the Americans. The British were losing 2 men for everyone on the American side. This was because of the sharpshooters from Virginia. Around 500 sharpshooters pinned down the British and took out a number of officers before the British could even get a chance to attack. Just when the British had no hope of winning the battle, the German Hessian forces saved the British. The British army won the first Battle of Saratoga. But 18 days later, they wouldn't expect what was about to go down. The second Battle of Saratoga, Bemis Heights, the British attacked first. The British thought the Americans were not ready, but it failed. The Americans attacked them, and the British fell back to the same spot they were before. Burgoyne had to get his army past the Americans to get more soldiers, food, and supplies. Winter was coming, and he needed that stuff. And when the British tried again, or at least were about to try, the British were surrounded by the Americans. So the Americans surrounded the British. Of course, the British had nowhere to go, so the British surrendered. 86% of the army was captured and taken by prisoners. This battle had a huge impact on the Americans, so big that Washington had to call Thanksgiving because of it. Washington may have called Thanksgiving because he won the battle. Well, he won, but someone joined the war. The French joined the Americans. The French joined the Americans in the Revolution. If the Americans didn't win, the French would have never joined them. The French wanted to make sure they were going to win. So if the Americans would have lost the battle, would they have won the Revolution? I wouldn't think so. Without the French, the Americans would have lost and the British would have taken America. Our world would be much different if it weren't for the French joining the Americans in the Revolution. And you could thank it all to the Battle of Saratoga and the actions people took in this battle. Like I said, it was a major turning point in the Revolution.